Entrepreneurship is a skill set that will be as essential to the 21st century as basic literacy, reading and writing was to the 20th. But first, let's take a minute and clear up some confusion about the word entrepreneurship. It comes from the French word entreprendre, which means simply to undertake. Not to start a billion-dollar technology company, but to undertake. Dr. Donna DeCarolis, the dean of the Close School of Entrepreneurship at Drexel University, offered this definition. When we choose to embark on a path not chartered, we are engaging in a small act of entrepreneurship. Being entrepreneurial is essentially about thinking and doing something we have not done before in order to achieve a desirable goal or outcome. Being an entrepreneur, approaching your life entrepreneurially, does not mean owning a business. It means choosing to embark on a path not chartered in order to achieve a desirable goal or outcome. Now, this definition leads to a counterintuitive conclusion. In order to be entrepreneurial, we must first be ignorant. In order to embark on a path not yet chartered, we must stand at the edge of our own blank map and take a step into the empty space. So if you hear the term entrepreneurship and you think, I have no idea what I'm doing, that's a good sign. You're on the right path to being more entrepreneurial. What my research has shown is that entrepreneurship is less about talent and more about skill. That just as no great author is born knowing how to read and write, no one is born understanding entrepreneurship. And that's why I'm here today, to tell you that a skill set, which I thought was innate, given at birth to people like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, is actually something anyone can learn. I'm going to talk about why entrepreneurship is going to be essential to your career, why it's something everyone can learn, and a couple ways you can get started. Now, I'm from Eads, Tennessee. It's a small suburb about an hour outside of downtown Memphis, and I don't think I'd ever met someone who called themselves an entrepreneur until long after I was done with school. But in the years since, I've studied entrepreneurship. I've met with hundreds of entrepreneurs from dozens of countries around the world. And in doing so, I've come to see why entrepreneurship truly will be an essential part of our global future. So let's start there. Why is it going to be essential? You've probably heard statements similar to this one from Klaus Schwab, the executive director of the World Economic Forum. In 2016, he said, "We stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before." So how do we prepare for something for which the scale, scope, and complexity will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before? The answer lies in a framework developed by IBM called the Cynefin framework. And I want to start here in this lower right-hand quadrant, the simple quadrant. This categorizes 4 different kinds of work. Simple work is one where the relationship between cause and effect is clearly known. It's something that you can write directions for. So think about like putting together a Lego set or putting together IKEA furniture. You move to the complicated domain. It's something where the relationship between cause and effect is not quite so clear. It's something that requires expert knowledge or training. Over the course of the 20th century, we shifted from an economy based on simple work to an economy based on complicated work. Take farming as an example. In 1880, 49% of the US labor force worked in agriculture. By 1980, that number was down to 3.4%. This is what work looked like for the average American in 1880. This is what work looked like for the average American in 1980. It's a little different. It's a little more complicated, something that required a different level of training and knowledge. Over the course of the 20th century, we made this transition from simple to complicated work. And a career that had belonged to 1 in every 2 people you knew now belonged to less than 1 in every 20. Even for farmers, work shifted from simple to complicated. My dad grew up on a farm. He used to hand shuck corn before going to school to feed the chickens. Today, feeding chickens means understanding torque sensors and load cells and tension hooks. A little more complicated than just shucking corn. Yet we adapted, which is not to say it was easy. Many people struggled with the psychological weight of changing their identity in a society that no longer had room for what they'd always done. But the results are proving worth it. In 1900, barely 20% of the world population could read and write. By 2000, that number was over 80%. In the US, if you adjust for inflation, income rose from less than $8,000 to more than $43,000. It's the greatest rise in any century in human history. This is what the typical house looked like in 1880. This is what the typical house looked like in 1980. I can tell you which one I'd rather live in. By making the transition from simple to complicated work, our parents and grandparents created dramatically more opportunities and wealth in our lives. If we can make the next transition from complicated to complex, we can do the same for ourselves and our children. But just as moving from simple to complicated work required us to reinvent work, we're going to have to do the same. Complicated work is the realm of expert knowledge and training. Complex work is the realm of entrepreneurship. It's embarking on a path not yet chartered. So, how do you embark on a path not yet chartered? If you can't write directions for it, how do you do it? So the best metaphor I've heard is given to me by a friend of mine named Rob, who I'm going to talk about more in a minute, and it's stair-stepping, which is to say, if you look and you investigate the stories of any well-known entrepreneur, they start with simple projects and gradually stair-step their way up to more and more complex ones. Now, we usually don't hear about these simple projects because by the time they're in the media or in the press, they're 10 or 15 years into that path. So let me give an example. This is Rob. He's actually the guy that gave me this idea for stair-stepping with his wife Sherry and their kids. Rob recently sold his latest company, Drip, in a large deal to a national software company. It made a lot of the press, it made some of the tech press. A lot of people heard about Rob for the first time and they thought, wow, what an impressive guy. Rob is a born-bred entrepreneur. But Rob is actually one of the first people that would disagree with you. His first project wasn't marketing technology automation. It was actually beach towels. He taught himself how to build websites using information he found online. He called up a company that sold beach towels and asked if he'd get a small commission for each beach towel he sold. And he started selling beach towels. And in doing so, he started to learn. He learned about technology and marketing and project management. But most importantly, he learned about embarking on a path not yet chartered. This wasn't something someone taught him to do. It was something he went out and figured out himself. Over the last 10 years, Rob has gradually stair-stepped his way into bigger, more ambitious, and more complex projects. What looks like an overnight success is actually more than a decade in the making. And this notion that entrepreneurship is a skill set is not something new. It's actually something we've forgotten. Peter Drucker, the most well-known business professor of the 20th century, said, "Everyone who can face up to decision-making can learn to be an entrepreneur and behave entrepreneurially." Entrepreneurship then is behavior rather than personality trait. Behavior rather than personality trait. So how do we learn this behavior? How do we learn to embark on a path not yet chartered? I'm going to give you two options. The first is to start a side project. A side project is something you can do to start learning entrepreneurship on the nights and weekends outside of your main gig. I want to give two characteristics I've seen over and over of successful side projects. The first is that you understand your customers, and the second is that you can launch it fast. So let's start with this first one, understand your customers. What does it mean to understand your customers? Here's a simple rule of thumb. Don't launch a product into a market you're not a part of yourself. This is a strategy called scratching your own itch. The logic is pretty simple. If you have a problem, it's likely that hundreds or thousands of other people have the same problem. And just as importantly, it's likely you know who those people are. You don't need to do any kind of market analysis or market research. You already know those people. Rob's first big entrepreneurial success was actually with a company called HitTail, which helped people find your site on Google. And this was a problem he was dealing with in his own business. How do I get people looking for beach towels to find my site? So when he had to make a decision about what to do next with the product or what to do next in the marketing, all he had to ask himself was, what would I want it to do? What would I want it to say? So that's number one. Know your customers. Keep a running list of problems and potential solutions, and then ask the second question, which is, can I launch it fast? One of the biggest mistakes first-time entrepreneurs make is they try and launch a project too big and too ambitious relative to their skill level. I had a reader that emailed me a few months ago. They were frustrated by getting bad gas mileage in their car, and they thought, I bet other people have this problem. And I said, yeah, that makes sense. And so they proposed a solution, which was a aerodynamic, all-weather enclosed, fuel-efficient, motor-electric hybrid motorcycle. Now, for someone that's spent decades in this industry, maybe this is a good idea. But for a first-time entrepreneur, I think it's a really poor idea. It's like trying to walk into the gym on the first day and pick up 400 pounds. The smarter, safer, faster way to pick up 400 pounds is to start with 40 pounds and come back week after week, year after year, adding a little bit of weight each time as you get stronger. What if instead of a whole new vehicle, he taught motorcycle safety classes where he taught people who drove cars how they could learn to drive a motorcycle in a safe way? Dan Norris, the author of a book called The 7-Day Startup, suggested that for a first-time entrepreneur, not to launch a project you can't launch in less than 7 days for under $100. I think that's a great rule of thumb. What problems do you have that you can design a solution to for less than $100 in under 7 days? So that's option number one, start a side project. Option number two, get an apprenticeship. If a side project is a way to learn entrepreneurship on your own time, an apprenticeship is a way to make learning entrepreneurship your main gig. It was a strategy used for hundreds of years by people like Benjamin Franklin to invent or reinvent their careers. Now, many companies, many organizations say they kind of support ongoing learning and training, but few really do. So here's a good rule of thumb. How different is the work you're doing today from the work you're doing 12 months ago? That is, are you following the instructions that I've laid down? Or are you having to constantly embark on a path not yet chartered? A combination of an apprenticeship and a side project was how I got started as an entrepreneur. I read a free guide online called The Beginner's Guide to SEO, which taught me a little about online marketing, and then I remembered a problem I'd had. When I'd gone to school for the first time, I didn't know how to buy furniture. I'd never bought furniture before. And so I built a website which educated people on how they could buy furniture when they went to college. Not a very sexy project, but I learned a lot. I learned about marketing and websites, a lot of the same things Rob was learning in his beach towel business. And there was a marketing agency that was sufficiently impressed with the project that they gave me a job which I treated as an apprenticeship. I came in and I was learning technology and marketing. But most importantly, I was having to embark on a path not yet chartered. The work I was doing every day was different from the work I was doing the previous day. I was constantly having to learn and reinvent. How different is the work you're doing today from the work you're doing 12 months ago? Now, I want to ask the question that I think is probably in the back of everyone's mind. What if I fail? First, if you follow the guidelines I've laid out here, failure is going to be really cheap. It's going to be less than a night out at a restaurant for a couple. More importantly, I want to ask another question, which is what if you never start? What technology offers us is an opportunity to find out who we are, but more importantly, who we might become. You each have a unique combination of skills, insights, and experiences, which combined with the technology available today, give you the opportunity to find your own unique place in the world. Consider that if the guitar had never been invented, the Beatles never would have composed. If painting had never been invented, Van Gogh never would have painted. If the written language or the English language had never been invented, Shakespeare never would have written his plays. We have a tremendous amount of technology available to us today. Combined with your unique experiences, insights, and beliefs, you each have the unique ability to embark on a path not yet chartered. I hope you will. Thank you.